Most marketing experts will tell you to generate more leads. Mark Osborne will tell you that's killing your business. Mark is the founder of Modern Revenue Strategies, a #1 best-selling author, and was named one of the top 25 marketing technology trailblazers in the world by Advertising Age. But what makes him dangerous is this. He's also a certified exit planning advisor. That means he doesn't just think about your next quarter's revenue. He's thinking about how every marketing dollar impacts your enterprise valuation when you're ready to sell. And his journey here started backstage with Grammy-winning musicians, not in a boardroom. He's burnt down a client's office, literally. And he spent 25 years figuring out why 80% of most companies' leads are actually destroying value instead of creating it. So, Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Leah. That was an awesome intro. I really appreciate that.
Definitely. So please give us some context. How did you get here? What's your background in a nutshell?
Sure. So I'll date myself a little bit for the audience that can remember back far enough. So in the 90s, I was playing in bands and managing bands. And I was also the early days of the internet. People didn't have access to it all the time. In fact, they kind of would like log on kind of weekly to check their emails. And so a lot of websites were more like billboards. Like when you go to the grocery store and you see a billboard with all the, signs on it, like, guitar lessons, peel off my phone number and call me later. People would go on the internet and post things like, I have the bootleg concert tape. Yes, I said tape, if anyone can remember that, of the Dave Matthews Band playing in Atlanta. So I know that this person likes music that sounds like Dave Matthews, and I know that they live somewhere near Atlanta, and their email address was their username because there was no such thing as spam at the time. People wanted you to know how to get in touch with them. So I started building databases of people that were fans of different genres that lived in different areas. Today, we'd call that database marketing or something like that. And then when one of my bands that sounded like Dave Matthews went to Atlanta, I would send an email to all of these folks and say, hey, come on out. So I started selling out shows for little unknown acts, which led to a job at a record label, which led to a job at a radio station. And I actually grew to be managing a top 10 station in a top 10 market. But radio is far too slow to embrace new technology. And that's what I've really been passionate about was the internet's ability to create sort of one-to-one relationships at scale. So I left a promising career in broadcast. I helped co-found a tiny little digital agency so I could really learn, get my hands on the keyboard and learn how paid search worked and how SEO worked and then how display worked and online video and all of these things. Got my MBA focused on marketing and advertising. And as you say, was so passionate about technology that I grew to be, one of the top 25 people in the world, according to Ad Age magazine. But the pace of innovation, all of the new technologies, all the new data sources, all the new RevOps and MarTech and AdTech was just growing so fast that you couldn't keep up with it. And so I realized that the real key to success with marketing wasn't chasing the next technology innovation. It was actually building strategy and then building systems and processes that supported that strategy. And that's what I help businesses with today is really helping them sort of identify that strategic approach to their business, the systems and processes that will fulfill that strategy, and then layering in the data and technology that make those systems work better. And as you say, I always have the perspective of building enterprise value rather than just top line revenue. And that's something different about me than other marketers. Most marketers can't spell EBITDA, whereas I'm generally focused on not just running campaigns, but actually building the value and transferability of the business so that when they are ready to sell, whether that's tomorrow or 10 years from now, they're getting the maximum value from that.
Very well said. I love it. And what I thought of is this. I was recently reminded that in life, no time is wasted. I think a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, they have winding careers. Like they're here, they're there, like things work out, things didn't. They had to pick themselves back up. But looking back, the dots always connect, right? I mean, for you, the way that you explained your story, that made perfect sense, right? Like, hey, like me learning how to build a database that led me to being able to do this and that. So what would you say were a couple of the skills that helped you the most into getting you here where you are today?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate that my career and my hobbies have been the same thing for my whole career, which is I'm very passionate about understanding interpersonal communication and sort of the persuasive arts, from marketing to sales, both on a one-to-one basis as well as at scale, and advertising to audiences. And so that real passion for that has been, probably the most valuable thing. And someone told me once, like, don't fall in love with a solution. A lot of entrepreneurs will fall in love with a solution like, I'm really good at doing X, so I want to go do X for other people. But that X is like a solution. Instead, fall in love with a problem. I'm really good at solving a particular type of problem. And so, because the ways to solve that problem will constantly be evolving. And so if you fall in love with a solution, you'll be outdated at some point. If you fall in love with a problem, then you'll always be sort of adapting to new ways to solve that problem and getting better at it and find it continually fresh and rewarding for you. And so that's one of the key things. The other, there was a real sort of wake up moment when I realized that you can't just be the first mover on technology and expect success. But there's a whole generation of marketers, like they've had 20 years of success where they literally were just the first ones to optimize their websites for search engines. And they got all this traffic once consumers started using search engines, and the first ones to buy search ads, and the first ones to buy Instagram ads, and the first ones. And so their whole career has just been sort of arbitrage, like being the first ones in a space, or the first to embrace a new technology, or the first to embrace a new data set. They've never had to come up with strategy. And so that realization that you can't just be the first to embrace a new technology and be successful. In fact, it's focusing on the strategy and then finding the technologies that support that strategy. That was a real wake up moment for me. And that happened probably kind of 7-ish years ago, but that was a big shift. And then the other big shift has been more recent, which is that, when you are running a business to scale from, 1 to 100 million or 1 billion or whatever you're trying to do, or you're going to run it from now until forever, you do very different things than if you are planning to exit or recapitalize within the next, 1 to 5 years. And because some of the strategic investments that you make in building your business and building the strategy might not pay off for 7 to 10 years. Now, they can pay off outrageously within that time, but they may not. And you might have to sort of, invest to sort of build that strategy, versus if you're planning to sell within the next 1 to 5 years, you want to do things that are focused on process, not as much strategy. You already have a strategy. If your business is at a size that it could be sold, could it be better? Probably. But investing the time and redoing your strategy, or redoing your website, or redoing your logo or tagline, all that's sexy and people want to do that, but that's not the best place to spend your time if you're actually thinking about an exit.
It's interesting. I think for the longest time, like it's not really in mainstream media about like how to exit, right? Because most people are always thinking about like, how do you grow your business?
Right. That's
But
right.
it is indeed an art. I mean, if you look at Alex Hormozy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's like super famous now, and his whole thing was that he sells like a mastermind, like a coaching, like a gym owner's mastermind. But like, how did he actually get an exit for it? Because that is a single. I mean, there's like a huge key man risk for that business. But no,
That's
he
right.
like stepped aside. He put in like a management team. He did all that stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and in fact, you hit, one of those nails on the head for sure, that one of the biggest blockers to people having a successful exit is that owner dependency. Because as a buyer that's looking at a business, they're like, well, Leo, how does your business run? You're like, well, I do this and I do that and I do this and I do that. That's not a business. That's a job. I don't want to buy your job from you, because most business buyers are looking for an investment that makes a return, not a job that they then have to work.
Yeah, definitely. And this is really important. I mean, there's probably a common thread of like what is important to do when it comes to exiting, right? Like, yeah, I mean, you have to clean up your books. You have to make sure there's no key man risk. You have to make sure there's like proper, like repeatable processes, like SOPs and stuff. Do you have like hey, here are like the quick 5 things to like sort of keep in mind as you sort of like navigate this 1 to 3 year exit time frame?
Yeah. So there are lots of ways to value a business, and almost as many ways to value a business as there are people that do valuations, but they frequently come down to a few key things. And those Key things are related to that owner dependency, that sort of key man risk, like how dependent is the business on a particular owner versus are there SOPs in place so that the owner could step away, or is there a team to run those SOPs so that the owner can step away? And so that's one of the big things that's, sort of crucial. The other thing that people look at a lot is sort of customer concentration. And so your source of revenues, are you largely dependent on one or two customers? Do they make one or two customers make up 30% or more of your revenues? If so, that's super risky. And if you transact, you'll transact that at a discount for sure. And so not only is that risk around just a few customers, but also there's risk around, well, do you have recurring revenue or do you have sort of event-based revenue? Like, do you sell a service that is a one-time delivery and a one-time payment, or do you sell a service that is expanded? And there are actually lots of clever ways to switch that. I'll give you an example. A roofing company, you do the roof, it is there for 10 years. And so like, it might be a big project, but you got to go find another project. You can't repeat sell to those customers. And so they're $1 million company, multiple. So, a business is ultimately valued as, the EBITDA, the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, times a multiple. And those multiples tend to be a range, but kind of stable by industry. So you might say, in the home services, it might be somewhere between 3 and 7. And that's a pretty wide range, but some businesses are range that. So a poor performing business generating $1 million a year would sell at a multiple of 3. A super high performing business that's doing $1 million a year might, sell for 7 million. So this roofing company, they realized that, man, if we could turn this one-time revenue into recurring revenue, it would really improve the multiple. And so what they did is instead of selling the roof for, call it $50,000 a one-time fee, they said, we'll do the roof actually for only $40,000, cheaper than anyone else, if you sign up for us to clean your gutters twice a year and do your windows every month. And people are like, man, I'd love to have my windows cleaned every month. I'd love to have the gutters cleaned, twice a year. And I'm going to get a discount on the roofing. Absolutely. Sure thing. So they turned this one-time revenue into recurring revenue. Their multiple went up more than once. So $1 million business that would have sold for 3 now is $1 million business that sold for 5. So they made an extra $2 million by making that minor change to how they approach it. So that quality of earnings or that revenue, both the concentration within customers as well as the sort of recurring nature, that's another big driver of sort of the ability to extend the business. And within that owner dependency, it's multiple things. It's not only do you have a team, but are there SOPs in place? All of those things that really sort of drive that. Those are probably the 2 biggest areas that people think about from an operational perspective, and that are, largely impacted by marketing and sales systems, which is what we work on.
Yeah. Now, how long would you say it takes to build up to being ready for exit if you're a new business getting to like the sort of minimum level of like viable exit versus like if you're an existing company and you're like, hey, I'm trying to retire, like how long in advance should you plan for it?
So there's a phrase in the exit planning space that exit planning is actually just good business strategy. And, if you think about kind of begin with the end in mind, and, I know you have a lot of expertise in real estate. I've heard it said in real estate, like you get paid when you buy, not when you sell, because you buy a good deal and then you reap that reward later. But the deal has already been determined how good it's going to be. And the same thing is not untrue with businesses, in that as you're starting it out, if you have an idea on how you're going to exit, are you going to sell to this type of buyer or to this other type of buyer, or generational, or have employees buy it or partners, having that in mind will guide really strategic decisions that you make as you're running the business to put you in a much better place to sell it. And so what we typically advise folks is, if you have 3 to 5 years, you will get much better outcomes when selling your business than if you just kind of, put the sign in the yard and hope someone's going to swing by and see it and buy it. Because that just doesn't work. And very often, a startling statistic for you, 70% of businesses that try to sell don't. they just go out of business. And largely that's because a lot of businesses think, well, when I'm ready to sell, there will be a buyer. The business makes tons of money. It's created a great lifestyle for me, but again, there's not really buyers for lifestyle businesses. And so if you start to think about how do I turn this from a lifestyle business into a sellable asset over the course of 2-3 years, you can do that. And you can actually make it something that's much more attractive to potential buyers. That said, we work with folks that had the mindset of, I want to retire in a year. What can I do in 12 months? And with the right resources, you can get a business pretty much ready to sell in 12 months. But most buyers are going to look at, 3 years of revenues. And if you don't have clean books for 3 years, that's going to discount the price that you're able to get. Most folks want to look at how you've been operating for 3 years. And so if you're really just, kind of staging the house for sale, it's going to show through. But there are a lot of things you can do even in, 6 to 12 months that will dramatically increase the multiple that you can get.
Hmm. And what's the sort of 80/20 of that, as far as like, look, if you had 12 or like 6 or 12 months to exit something, what would be the key things that you focus on?
Yeah, start with process. And it's building out those SOPs and, sort of delegating and elevating so that it doesn't have that owner dependency. And then making, sort of sure that your ducks are in a row as it relates to your customers. If you have high customer concentration, what can you do to raise up some of those middle tier customers to be more like your top tier customers so that there's less dependency? What can you do to, extend those one-time sales into recurring sales so that there's a less dependency? What can you do to ensure that all of your contracts say that they're transferable to a new owner? Because that's something that people don't think about a lot. And those can be a deal breaker, and it's all going to come out in due diligence. And so to start to get those things in order is the sort of first and foremost thing that we do. But we actually start with a sort of a diagnostic where we'll look at, and we partner with a lot of, companies that do valuations and are helping business owners with getting their taxes in order, getting their, sort of wealth advisory together so that they know what they're going to do in the next chapter of their life, ensuring that, all of their estate is set up and all of those things. While they're working on that, we can work on improving the value of the business through marketing and sales systems. But a lot of those folks have a standard approach to valuing a business. There's software called like Value Builder or Mouse or Quist. And so we've built tools that will take the reports that come out of that and automatically analyze and then generate a report on, okay, so let's go a level deeper on marketing and sales.
And that's a perfect segue into marketing, because one of your hot takes is that generating more leads is actually killing your business.
Yeah.
Now, why is that?
So I appreciate you bringing that up. And so the book was published a couple years ago, Are Your Leads Killing Your Business? And I'll tell you about that. But free copy for anyone listening that's interested. They can go to modernrevenuestrategies.com/free download, get a free copy of the book. It comes with all of the templates and calculators, everything that you need to start to implement this in your business today. But the sort of genesis of that title is, so many business owners are like, I just need more leads, more leads, more leads, more leads. And what they don't realize is that quantity, if it's not quality, can actually really kill their business in a few key ways. The first, all things being equal, there's only so many hours in the day. And so if you've got 100 leads, you're likely to kind of approach all of them and kind of spread your resources over, all 100 like peanut butter. But your competitors are more than likely built systems that help them quickly identify, of those 100, what are the 20 that actually have the potential to be one of my best customers? And then instead of spreading their resources evenly across all 100, they're putting 80% of their attention on those 20 leads that have the potential to be their best customers. The other 80 is just getting 20% of their resources. But you have to build systems that allow you to identify those early on and then focus your resources on them. Because what happens when you don't do that is you don't win those deals. So think about it like if one lead is getting 1% of your attention, 100 leads, and 1%, but they're getting 80% of the attention from one of your competitors, that competitor is probably going to win them. and you're going to be left with the scraps that your competitors fundamentally didn't want. And the reason why those are killer clients is because, for starters, they don't believe in what you're building. And so as a result, they want you to customize it for them. Well, you know what the market wants. So you're building a solution or a product or whatever it is based on your belief of where the market is heading. When they make you customize your solution or your product to suit them, that's pulling you behind what you know the market wants. So that can be a killer. Also, because they don't really believe in what you're building, they're going to grind you down on the price. So you have no margin to reinvest in making the product or service better. So your competitors are reinvesting into making that product or service better. So you're falling further behind them as well. And then the final type of killer client are the ones that churn out before they ever provide a testimonial or a referral or any advocacy in the marketplace. And without real advocates in the market, you just can't win. And so if all of your clients are the scraps that your competitors didn't want and fall into one of these categories of, well, we're having to customize it for them, or we're ground down on rate, or they're churning out before they ever, advocate, it's a slow, painful death. And I see this all the time with companies where they have this just very slow death spiral where they're very busy, but they're never going to sort of rise to that position of dominance in their category because they've got these clients that are killing them.
And you bring up a very important point. I think there's the three P's in business, right? You have your product, your promotion, and your pricing. And it's very important to get all those three right.
Yeah.
Because, there's people that are pure marketers. They only care about the promotion. They care about some like crazy, lead funnel that will get people in through the door. But the product sucks and like people churn
That's
out,
right.
or like it's too expensive, right? Or like there's a procrastinator that's like, I'm gonna like make this thing the most perfect statue possible, and like I can't advertise it, I can't sell it at a good price, and then I fail my business because like I'm burning through cash flow.
That's right. Yeah.
So
That intersection, and I am a big believer that, marketing is in a very strategic part of the business because it's the nexus with the customer when it's done right. Rather than just being all push, marketing is also the opportunity to get input from the marketplace about what do the customers really want? What do they really value about your product? And that's why we also approach sort of revenue as three interlocking systems. It's the sort of marketing stuff, the attraction systems. How do you attract the right prospects? The sales stuff, acceleration systems. How do you accelerate those best deals through the sales pipeline? But it's also the activation systems. How do you activate clients for fast renewals, larger upsells, more referrals? And you really have to bring all three of those systems together in order to get the true insight, because very often your customer success team is, servicing clients, and they know what your clients really love about you. But if they aren't communicating that back to marketing, then marketing's out there maybe saying the wrong things or the least compelling things. And then if sales is sort of promising whatever it takes to get them over the line, well, then customer success is stuck, trying to, paper over by bringing all three of those together, you create a much more cohesive and holistic approach to building your revenues.
yeah, that is very interesting. And when you go up to like a higher level, I think we were talking about this earlier, just about how some people they focus on what to do rather than like what the outcome is.
Mm-hmm.
I think when it comes to like doing marketing, doing promotions, like what you're doing is you're building trust with your potential customer. And there's like many different ways to do it. Like you could do it one to one on like sales calls, or you could do like much bigger on like content. Like if you post this on YouTube, you could build that trust over time.
Sure.
So do you have like I don't know, like fundamental skills that you think are helpful to develop, like as a marketer? Is it like how to capture attention, how to retain attention, how to convert it? What is that to you?
So, different businesses have different challenges at different stages in their growth cycle. So when you are sort of first launching a business, people have to know you exist. If they don't know you exist, well, then they can't engage with you. So that's really an awareness. And in fact, I prefer the term salience. So awareness is, I know that you exist. Salience is, you are top of mind when I think of folks in your category, which is very different. And then once they know you exist, they have to care. enough to, sort of act. So the interest, awareness, desire, and action, that sort of classic thing. And what we find is very many businesses make the mistake of saying, we exist by talking about the benefits of the category, customer relationship management software. I'll just sort of, pick something out. Wouldn't it be great to keep track of all of your, all of your prospects in one place and automate all of the things that you do? Yeah, that would be great. Any CRM does that. So don't be out there talking about that. Talk about what makes you unique, because in that way, not only are you building salience, but you're also building differentiation at the exact same time. And that's the key difference that we see from successful companies versus those that wind up burning through all their cash, is by really knowing their strategic positioning and that differentiation, what makes them unique in the marketplace. They can talk about those unique benefits, those unique capabilities that deliver those benefits. And that makes them much more compelling to the marketplace, rather than just, we exist, we have the same benefits as everyone else in the category. And that's not very compelling.
Mm. And speaking of the benefits, um, you know, in the current sort of landscape of marketing, of content and things like that, like what do you think has been the most effective ways to develop that to people? Because I mean, if you think about like through time, right? Initially, like I don't know, 2013, you put up any Facebook ad, like you're getting people in to your webinar or whatever. But nowadays, like that stuff is over. You have to make content. You have to be super consistent with it. You have to go on podcasts, things like that. So what do you think it is right now? How do like businesses like get their name out there, tell people that what they do?
So let me twist that question,
Yeah.
because it's people that answer that question with, oh, do this, that are sort of
Mm.
killing marketing. And the reason is that answer is different for every business. And it's different in a couple different ways. The first way is you have to really understand your prospective customer and what their buyer's journey looks like. How do they go from being aware that this is a problem that needs to be solved, to prioritizing to solve the problem, to looking for ways to solve it, to looking for people that solve it in that way, to evaluating the different offers from the folks that solve it in the way that they've decided to solve it? How do they go through that? What's the information they need at each of those stages? Where do they go to look for that information? So when you have that understanding, now pair that with, now what makes you different and better, and not better, but really only in the marketplace. So you can be in a crowded category with 100 different people that all seem to do the same thing, but you can find what I call onlyness, and I didn't coin that phrase, but we use it a lot, through looking at what are maybe 3 different things that, when taken together, make you the only person in your category that solves it that way, and that has that capability. And then you can inject information at each of those stages through the lens of your onlyness, so that not only do they become aware that this is a problem that could be solved, but if they decide to solve it, this is the right way to solve it, because it's the way we solve it. And then as they start to evaluate, well, between multiple people that solve it that way, why would I work with you? Well, because we have this unique capability or expertise or experience or philosophy on the right way to solve it. That's how you find those really unique opportunities. Like, by really understanding your customer, you can realize that, wow, they're all aggregating at this watering hole, whether that's a certain, golf tournament, or a certain, website that they read, or a certain podcast that they listen to. But you can never find that insight until you take the time to really understand the customer. Great. So now you know where they are. What do you say? Well, until you've taken the time to find your onlyness, you can't have that message to put at that watering hole, wherever they're aggregated at, that really helps you sort of differentiate and be compelling, so that they want to engage with you. And so it's the intersection of those 2 layers of insight that finds these really powerful things that, and we've done stuff that will double a company's revenue in 90 days, because we take the time to do that up front. And that's the key, is finding that.
Mm. So learning how to listen to your customer, that's what you would say.
I would say it's beyond just listening. It's synthesizing. So, and we talk about, sort of you need what we call a 3S guide, which is someone that can strategically look at like what's happening in the marketplace, and then someone that is system oriented and sort of that logical left brain that can build the systems and processes that can help you take advantage and actuate that strategy. But then you also need that left brain or right brain creative synthesis that can see multiple things. And so customers are, might be saying three different things, but you understand that 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 all of those are symptoms, not the actual problem. It's that insight about what they're really trying to do, that creative synthesis that delivers those breakthroughs. That systemizing gives you that incremental Kaizen, constantly improving growth, but it's that synthesis that gives you that breakthrough transformative insight that really unlocks the marketplace.
So when you're saying synthesis and just layering in AI, right? I think
Sure.
with the rise of AI, a lot of people have gotten very lazy because they're
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm just going to throw this into ChatGPT. It's going to
Yeah.
tell me what to do, but it's some like half-baked answer.
Right.
But I think as there's more and more noise and like substance, like critical thinking and having original thought becomes more and more important. So to what you say, synthesis.
Yeah. Well, and you can teach ChatGPT to not be as dumb as it is. And we do a lot of that. We've built a lot of systems but I like to say we use a 20-page prompt for a 2-paragraph output. And so we will train ChatGPT on here is all of this information about the ideal customer that they're going after, that we've learned from having conversations with customers, and we've really synthesized that and distilled it down and found those insights. And here's all of the information that we know about the competitive landscape because we've taken the time to research those competitors. And here's what makes us really unique because we've taken the time to look at ourselves in the mirror and find that onlyness. Now, what should the email say? But if you just say, give me an email to send to a prospect, you're going to get the dumbest answer in the world. But if you take the time to feed ChatGPT all of these things and say, the goal of this email is to move them from this stage to this stage, then you can actually get some really powerful stuff out of it. But that's the key is to do that work on the back end, and
Yeah.
then also to do the work on the front end too. In that, I tell everyone, no matter how good you've trained your GPTs, whichever one you're using, you should still think of it as like the first year person at your company. Like you would never let that person do something that would go straight to a client. You should never take something straight from ChatGPT straight to a client. It should always go through a layer of oversight. Now, I will say, like, I worked for a lot of Fortune 500 and had teams of analysts that I worked with. And I very frequently would like have a project that I would take to an analyst and then explain it to them, and they would go do it. 2 days later, they'd come back with the answer and it wouldn't quite be right. And so then we'd have to work on it a little bit, and they'd go back and do another round. So now 3 days later, I have the output of that project. I can get the same thing from ChatGPT in 20 minutes if you kind of set it up correctly and give it all the instructions that it needs. So that
Mm,
acceleration of value is really remarkable.
yeah. So what are your favorite ways to use AI? Do you use like automations or just the LLM models?
So, I mean, I use it all day, every day in different ways. One of the things that I love is the ability to, so I used it in sort of coding the report that I talked about. So one of my, exit advisor clients can generate a report that they spent hours with their client, interviewing them and really getting details about their business and how their business runs and all that stuff. And they generate this pretty meaty set of insights. I can run that in 20 seconds and have a deeper layer of insights specific to marketing and sales, like that. But I did that iteratively, coding it, or they call it vibe coding, where you're essentially just kind of going back and forth to make sure it does what you want it to do. Now, when I get ready to, productize this and like put that product out in the world, that code will go through a human coder to make sure it all works. But that was a fun project to do. We also do what I call synthetic personas. And in fact, Forbes just did a write up on me related to this, where essentially we can take a whole lot of data on our customers and create a persona that personifies who our customer is. And then we can ask it things like, would you prefer for us to advertise to you in this magazine or this magazine? Would you prefer for the ad to talk about this benefit or that benefit? And it can respond just like a customer. Like you can create essentially a synthetic customer panel, but you need a lot of data to feed it. And the more accurate data you have, the better it looks. Writer from Forbes was like, so like if I took all of my text messages with this girl that I like in high school and fed it into Chat GPT, I could then come up with like the perfect way to ask her to prom. And I was like, I mean, kind of, yeah. But like we even do things, or I have had colleagues that will have a difficult client. And so they feed every conversation that they have with that client, every phone call transcript, every email, every text message goes into a synthetic version of that client. And then they show proposals to that before showing it to the client. And the Chat GPT will say, it's not going to like, or they're not going to like this part and this part. You need to have a follow-up answer on why you think that's the right way to go. And he's like, every time, whatever, because I've done such a good job of training it. But you can also pull in a lot of, sort of publicly available second party data. So like if you are working on a product or you're in a category that people leave public reviews, you can scrape all of those reviews and find out what do they hate about your competitors, or what do they hate about products in the category. And ChatGPT can really make a lot of sense of that in a really interesting way and provide a lot of insights.
Yeah, I think what AI sort of is letting us do, I mean, especially in marketing, it's like to synthesize a large amount of data. Because like previously, we would just pawn this off to like an intern and be like, hey, look, spend your whole day doing this.
That's right. That's
But
right.
no, you just do this. It's great. So speaking of the leveraging time and like technology and stuff, I mean, you have a lot going on, right? I mean, you have like podcasts, you have like consulting firm. Like, how do you do all of this? Like, how do you manage your time? How do you manage your priorities?
Yeah, I mean, it's constantly a battle. And they say, like that's the real differentiator between folks that wind up being successful and not is, you know, the one thing you can't get back is time. Every minute that passes is a minute that you'll never get back. And so by creating the right priorities and then focusing your time on those priorities, that's the key. And, the way that we think about it is the same way that we work with our clients is, let's make a 90-day plan. Here are the things that we need, that we want to accomplish in this 90 days based on a strategy. And then what are the processes that we need to build in order to accomplish those things? Let's break that down into 2-week sprints. All right. So then what do I got to do? What do I got to do today that moves this scorecard metric that I'm going to look at every week as I march down the field and, sort of accomplishing that 90-day goal? And the biggest mistake that we see people make is they take too big of a bite. Like they're like, I want to do this, 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 and this. Yeah, those are all good things to do. And I like to say with the CEOs I work with, I'm like, there's 10 smart things you could do in the next 12 months. You really only have the bandwidth to do kind of 3 to 5 of them. So let me explain why I think this should be one of those 3 to 5, but there might be other, sort of extenuating circumstances that would mean that it shouldn't be prioritized. But that's the key, is picking those right priorities and then building out that plan to march against them.
Yeah, I think people, not to overgeneralize, but I feel like men tend to overestimate their ability to execute. They tend
I'm
to
sure
set
there
like
are statistics that would support that statement.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think knowing what to prioritize and like, because when you're like a solo founder, like it's fine. Like you push yourself, have lofty goals and stuff. But when it comes to whole team, like once you build it up, you have like employees and staff members, like how do you get them to achieve something? It's like it has to be a stretch goal, not an impossible goal, because otherwise like they just don't feel like they're achieving.
Yeah, so one of our core values is around collaboration, and we're big believers that winners want to play a winnable game. So we always, and this is one of the core things around that unification between marketing, sales, and customer success, is so often we see companies that are like, we want to grow by 20% next year. Everyone's quota is now 40% higher. And we know that, half of them will hit it and half of them won't, and that's okay. We just don't do that. And instead, if we say, well, why do we think that 20% is an achievable growth? What are have we made investments in the product that makes it that much better? Have we moved into some new marketplace that represents that opportunity for growth? Is the market growing at a rate that would support that? Are we stealing share from our competitors at a rate that would support that? If not, what are we doing differently that we think is going to impact that? So that we're actually building targets based in reality, and then holding people to, aspirational goals around that, but rewarding them when they achieve it, rather than just saying everyone's, budget's 40% higher, good luck, which I've seen so many companies do. And then what happens is your best performers will leave because they can't. And then you're stuck with the scraps. It's that same sort of scenario as, killer clients. You've now got killer employees because you've kind of got the only rats that couldn't get off the sinking ship. And I've seen companies put themselves in that position frequently when they are growing and things are going great and they've got a great team and everything going, their way. They shoot themselves by, creating these unwinnable games, and then the winners leave.
Yeah. I think the one thing winners have is options,
That's
and
right.
people don't think about that. And so, I mean, you've probably seen a ton of businesses of sort of all walks in life, so to speak. What's like, how do the small businesses become like medium size, or like how do they, turn it up a notch and like build out that team?
So, it's interesting. There's a philosophy in SaaS, B2B SaaS, called T2D3, triple for 2 years, double for 3 years. And that framework has actually been successfully followed by lots of businesses in the space. Now, it takes a lot of resources. These are normally sort of funded, venture backed companies that do that. But from looking at companies that do that, we actually see some very standard breakpoints. There's a breakpoint at about 1 million. There's a breakpoint at about 5 million. There's another one at about 10, another at about 25, another at 50, another at 100, as companies sort of grow. And companies have the same challenges at each of those stages. And so to get to that first million, what you have to really get right first is, do you have product market fit? Have you identified the niche that you can serve better than anyone else with your onlyness that is profitable enough, large enough to get you to that million? And until you have found a product service delivery model that allows you to, sort of dominate that niche, and that niche is large enough to get you to 1 million, you kind of can't go any further. And the things that, sort of impact that are the product itself, the way you package it, like, is it trialable versus, the large scale investment, how you price it, are you profitable on that pricing, and is that attractive and delivering a value equation to the marketplace? That's the first thing you have to overcome. Then oftentimes people think, well, once I got product market fit, I can just stomp on the gas. But actually, the next thing that you have to do is get go to market fit, which is this, what's your strategy for taking it out to the larger market? And so often we see companies say, so let's try this and this and this and this. Like, we're going to shotgun blast these, 5, what we think are good ideas for go to market strategies. But that actually delays your success. The good companies that actually break through from that million up to 5, 10 million are the ones that pick one strategy strategically based on what's the most likely to work in their category, and in the size of the product or service that they sell, the customers that they sell to, and then they really figure out how to do that strategy so well that builds a moat and a wall that their competitors can't overcome. Versus folks that sort of shotgun blast, they spread out their resources too thin, and they never really get any of them down really pat. And so it's picking that one strategic approach and then really honing in on that lets companies break through to that next layer of growth.
I love that. And just a couple last questions.
Sure.
But before then, like how can people get in touch with you? Who are you trying to meet? How can we help you as an audience?
Sure. So, I mean, honestly, as I mentioned before, like, I just love talking about marketing and sales for business. And so, for anyone listening, I'm happy to spend, an hour on the phone with you and talk about what it is that you're doing, and where you're, hitting some struggles, and share with you, what have I seen other companies of your size in your industry do. And I've got benchmarks from hundreds of companies built over the last 20 years. And you won't walk away from the conversation without some fun ideas. And so I'm happy to do that. You can reach me, Mark, at modernrevenuestrategies.com. Mark is with a K. And again, the book, for a lot of, business owners that are, kind of just starting out and trying to get to that sort of $1 million mark, Like this is intended to be a primer that will take you, from here to there. It's got it's condensed, uh, you know, over $100,000 MBA and 20 years of study and practice, and all of the best thinking from all the best folks, all put in one easily sort of executed framework. And you can get that at modernrevenuestrategies.com/free download. You can buy it at Amazon if you want, but I'll give it to you for free if you want to just go get the download. And anyone that downloads it, you'll get an email from me asking how you liked it. So easy ways to engage with me there, or I'm easy to find on LinkedIn.
So last question is, so if you can ask the next guest on the podcast a question or a talking point, what would you want to ask?
That's a good one. I've never had somebody ask me that. What do you know that I need to know? It would probably be the thing that I would ask. Like
Yeah.
I'm always curious to learn from other people's insight, and I really think that everybody has something powerful to bring into the world, and that's why I'm really passionate about doing marketing and sales, because unfortunately good ideas don't sell themselves, and I love working with business owners that are creating really innovative solutions and products, and helping them sort of achieve the success that they deserve with those products by helping them connect to the marketplace. So that'd probably be my question.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your wisdom, Mark. This has been a wonderful session.
Oh, thank you, Leo. I really enjoyed it.